You're listening to WZNC LP Bethlehem, 99.9 FM, and streaming online at nococommunityradio.org. This is North Country Community Radio. I'm Amanda McKeen, and you're listening to North of Normal. Every week, this show reminds me how easy it is to underestimate people. We meet someone in passing, see their job title, hear where they live, or think we know their story based on a few surface details. But when you sit down long enough to have a real conversation, things tend to get way more interesting. You learn about the risks that people took, the moments that changed them, the challenges they didn't see coming, and the experiences that shaped who they are today. And that's why North of Normal has existed. And it's what we've always been about here. Not interviews, conversations. A chance to slow down, get curious, and hear the stories that don't usually make it into everyday conversation. I'm glad you're spending part of your Tuesday with us. My guest today is Jamie Cunningham. But before we bring Jamie into the conversation, I want to share a short passage from something he recently wrote and shared with me. It speaks to something that many of us experience, whether we're leading a business, raising a family, serving our community, or simply trying to navigate life. Jamie writes, "Maybe the real weakness is pretending we have no fear. Maybe the real danger is allowing people to believe that leadership means certainty at all times. Maybe that old model of leadership, commanding, invulnerable, emotionally armored, is part of what has failed us. I have spent 50 years as a climber. I have put up more than 151st ascents in the Adirondacks, the White Mountains of New Hampshire, and on Mount Katahdin in Maine. In those moments, fear was never absent. Fear was always there. The task is not to eliminate fear. The task is to manage it, listen to it, sort through it, and then keep your eye on the prize long enough to find the next possible move." Jamie Cunningham, welcome to North of Normal.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I do just need to let listeners know that I was panicking about 15 minutes ago when you weren't here. And I was thinking, okay, I can do this. I can pivot to something. This is unexpected and I can do this.
Yeah, it's a test of fear.
It was.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, when things don't go as planned, what do we do with that? You know, so I had my own little test before you got here. Right. It was only appropriate.
Uh-huh. Then I was walking aimlessly across the street trying to find,
across Main Street. Yes, and I was worried you were going to get hit by a car.
Yeah, I thought I was next door to Crumb Bum.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know why.
I don't know either, but I'm glad you found it.
Panic.
Yeah. So we each had our own little moments of panic this morning, and we were talking off air about 5 minutes before we went live about why is it that we feel nervous right now? And you brought up such a great point is that, you related it to climbing. Like sometimes when you're excited about something new, a new encounter is the words you used, that sometimes it's that same feeling of anticipation. It's not necessarily fear.
It could be anxiety.
Anxiety.
It depends on what you want to attach it to.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm so excited that you're here today. We have a couple of items that we need to cover first. And the first one that I want to just remind listeners that when I have a guest on, first of all, I ask them beforehand if there's anything off limits that they don't want to talk about. I always want to respect that. So we always have that conversation beforehand. And then I educate my guests a couple times before they're on that we do have some guidelines here for the show in order to keep it authentic and aligned with the mission. And those rules are definitely no politics, no religion, no selling things. What was the other one?
Bad language?
Oh, yeah. No profanity. Thank you.
Yeah.
See, this was a test for you.
Yeah.
So I found that those guidelines really help shape the types of conversations that we're looking to share with the community. And it is North of Normal's birthday month.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I'm just so pumped to be here at this point. Sticking with something over and over again, whenever you have a milestone, it's like worth celebrating,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I think that's why I'm so proud, is that I've stuck with it.
Yeah. Well, this show is just incredible. I think it goes beyond the North Country community. I think everybody can listen to any episode and take a lot out of it in terms of personal, gain, in terms of, what they could apply to their own lives. And that's the beautiful thing about this program. It's
really
good. Yeah. I look forward to every episode when it comes out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about how you and I met each other. Neil Brodeen, who is turning out to be quite the connector for this show, you were on the list of recommendations. I will always ask my guests afterwards to tell me who they think would make a great guest. And Neil was so gracious in giving me a bunch of names. And when he put you on the list, I already knew who you were, probably because of being involved in the hiking community. And I dabbled in climbing a little bit. And your name has just come up,
Right. Search and rescue, too.
Yes. Yeah. And with you having so many first ascents, I think that just comes up a lot. Mm-hmm. So when I saw your name on the list, I was like, yes, I'm going to get an introduction to Jamie Cunningham. So I think Neil reached out to you separately, and then I got an email from you.
Yeah, we had correspondence, and we've been friends for a long time, and he recommended that I'd be good for the show, and one thing led to another, and here I am sitting down in front of you.
Yeah, and when you caught wind of the show, you sent me this long, beautiful email. You had listened to multiple episodes in a row,
right?
And
I was binge.
You were binge listening,
yeah.
Maybe because of your recent knee surgery.
I
no, just because you binge listen.
No, because it was so good. And
man!
And there was a lot of people I known for a long time.
Yeah,
that were on there, and that curiosity.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you sent me this lovely email. You said you were very interested in being on the show, and I asked if we could meet for coffee. Then we met for coffee.
Right. And then we spent 3 hours of talking.
On a Saturday.
Yeah.
I think it was a weekend.
Good thing you didn't have anything else to go to.
Life is a lot slower here in Littleton.
Yeah, well.
But yeah, we met for coffee at Crumbum, and you told me just a small portion, I'm imagining, of your life story. And I just was moved by that. I mean, you've been through a lot of hard stuff, and I think it makes sense knowing, why you climb and things like that. And even though I know those pieces of your story, I'd love to revisit them today for our listeners.
Yeah.
Normally I'm asking questions to things that I don't necessarily know, but I'm going to ask repeat questions today. I'd love for you to share with our listeners how you ended up in New Hampshire, and I know that is a huge answer.
Yeah, it is. It basically started out with my oldest sister, Kristen, who ended up going to it was St. Mary's in the Mountains, which later became the White Mountain School. Mm-hmm. And she went there, graduated there at St. Mary's in the Mountains in 1965. So that's the first time I arrived in Franconia, is that we stayed at Rayner's Inn, which I think it pretty much still stands. So every time I'm by there, I can have that memory. And then later on, she ended up settling in Dalton, actually. Well, no, with my other sister, Karen. They settled in Franconia, and that would be early, like 1970, somewhere in there. And then that became a place. I always returned here. This ended up being home base for me. And started out in Princeton, New Jersey.
That's where you were born?
Yeah, in Princeton, New Jersey. And, I've skipped stones. I've been from place to place. And one thing we have in common is we've lived in places abroad for extended periods of time.
Yeah.
I came from a very dysfunctional family, severely alcoholic parents, and a lot of trauma. So I come from a trauma story.
Yeah.
And that's informed my life, and be able to kind of transport myself through time. And I think everything in my life is informed that, and anybody who's experienced trauma knows that you travel with it the entire life, but it's how you deal with it. But as far as getting to this area, the seed was, sown by my sister, but really my parents, knowing that, that there was this boarding school up in the White Mountains. And my father went the blue blood route of going to Andover for his boarding school, then to Yale, and then Princeton, and then becoming a chemical engineer. But as far as, it would be fitting that she would end up at St. Mary's in the mountains.
Yeah.
So, and then, so they were settled here. So when I was, so we went from Princeton, and I grew up sailing on the coast of New England, sailing from, every summer would sail from Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey, all the way up to Bar Harbor, and a little bit further on down east. So I grew up sailing, learning coastal navigation and seamanship, by sailing. It was about 7, 8, learning my knots and stuff. But what happened is we moved down to the British Virgin Islands to start a charter yacht business. So the boat I grew up on was a 54-foot yawl called Stormy Weather, which is kind of ironic.
That is ironic.
During those days, my parents would fight physically and verbally. And in Princeton, we had a house that had picture windows. And for me, the experience was we would go, the kids would go upstairs and we'd just hunker together. And,
when your parents were fighting?
Yeah. So, war was going on below. But where I found refuge was to go outside, and I would look into this. But that's where I got grounded to the earth, is by, finding comfort by being amongst the rocks, the trees, and making forts. And I had one good friend, that we go off exploring, and that became the beginning of, the quest to explore. Yeah. And I have another sister, Erica, who's been on the autistic spectrum her entire life. And, her nature for her behavior is, self-harm. She would be beating her head, go into tantrums, beating her head, with her fists, and eventually becoming blind in one eye.
From her own doing?
Yeah, from her own doing.
Wow.
And cutting her wrists. And, but she's, severely disabled, mentally disabled. So you couple that up with crazy parents. It was a wild, growing up. And
So
I'll get back to the New Hampshire thing.
Yeah, no worries. I totally get it. Real quick, though, you're just talking about grounding yourself by going outside. It must have been difficult to suddenly be on a boat. You couldn't escape.
Exactly.
What did you do?
Well, there was no place to run or hide.
Right.
You could go up on deck, climb the mast to get. That's the furthest point that you could get. And for me, I would sleep in the engine room if we're motoring along, because there would be noise from the engine. So I learned how to sleep in odd places and be uncomfortable and be happy enough to be there.
Wow.
Yeah. So. Cruising the New England coast. If we often stopped at Mystic Seaport, where there's a museum for old ships, square riggers, and I would read books like Joshua Slocum's first solo sailing around the world. And he did that in the late 1800s. The Hornblower series of books and, different sea stories and stuff. So I always thought that I would grow up to be a sea captain.
Interesting.
And in my imagination, square riggers still, and clipper ships still existed.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of imagination, and that's where I found refuge is in my mind, and to be able to explore places, that are imaginary and real. But there was an incident just an example of many, many incidents where I found refuge just going through the museum, going onto these old square rigger ships that, go from, the 1700s, 1800s, and, just, wander around on these ships.
Yeah.
And I'd just be fascinated by it. And then the exhibits, and I just got carried away with it. And one time I came out of there and the boat was gone. And I'm going like...
Your family?
Yeah. And I'm young, so I'm... At this point, I'm like 10 years old.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, 9, 10, somewhere in there. And I look out into the channel, and the boat's motoring away. And they basically, abandoned me. And then I was yelling out, crying, At that age, I was pretty vulnerable. And, that was a huge shock for me. So I'm yelling out to the boat. And, my father says... swim. You're going to have to swim to get on board, which I did, and that was a humiliation as a young child.
Yeah.
Nobody should have to go through that. So there's a lot of trauma there.
Yeah.
As well as my sister, and we would. Erica and I would go off exploring, and that became sort of like exploring, just to get away. Even when Erica was, as Erica was, I became sort of, I was able to be a calming force with her, and also if she really goes into a trauma, or into a where she's really having an event, I would try to restrain her, and in her mind that was being, abused. But it's also, I had to do that as a child, so that was difficult.
That is difficult.
But we'd go off in the woods and explore, and it would be, I think it was a good memory for her.
And a break.
Yeah, and a break.
Right?
Yeah. At that, at this point, like Karen and Kristen being the older one, we're all 3 years apart. Were then, this period of time, they were off to high school and then eventually college. So what was remaining, it was me and Erica, and we moved then, 1968, moved down to the British Virgin Islands. In my father's mind, it was... I think it was an idea of change, that change of location, and with my mother and father to try to make a change.
To fix something?
To fix something.
Yeah.
But change in location doesn't fix it.
Oh, man, I needed to hear that today.
Yeah.
You don't even know. But
I think everybody at some extent has a similar story, maybe not as severe. There's people that have had way worse situations than I, but I can only speak to my own experience. Right. So the British Virgin Islands, getting back to New Hampshire eventually. So New Hampshire, I had a home in New Hampshire, a home in the British Virgin Islands, and my mother actually died of burns. She was smoking in bed, had a few martinis, so she was drunk in bed, smoking in bed. She was a chain smoker, and her bedclothes and her nightie caught on fire. Back then it wasn't a fireproof stuff, so she flash burned her body, and then died 10 days later. What happened in the British Virgin Islands, my father was away on business in Buffalo. My grandmother lived in Lockport, New York, which is between Buffalo and Niagara Falls. So my mother is in dire straits. We're renting a house, and we were renting it from a British family, and the husband or father of that family happened to be visiting the British Virgin Islands because he had business concerns down there. He was a lawyer, and fortunately he was downstairs in that apartment downstairs, but I was the one that discovered my mom. I walked in, I could smell smoke and crying out, but first I thought it was Erica, so I didn't pay any, that was kind of a normal sound to hear distress. But the smoke kind of brought me into the room, and seeing my mom standing there like a statue. So I led her to the outside where... How
old were you at this point?
I'm about 11 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty young.
Yeah. So I didn't know this at the time, but when you suffer burns all over your body, you're susceptible to like hypothermia. And she was starting to shiver and, clearly in shock. So I went and got blankets and sheets and covered her up, and David then came up and took over from there and called in an ambulance, and then she went to the hospital. My father at this point had flown in. He arranged to have the U.S. Coast Guard come in with a helicopter and airlift her to Puerto Rico. This is 1970, like around Good Friday. She actually died on she lived for 10 days after. So went to Puerto Rico. My father rented the back of a Pan Am airplane, took out a bunch of seats, and flew her to New York City, which is where I think there was one of only two burn centers in the country at that time. I think the other one was in Texas, somewhere like Dallas or Houston. So eventually what happened is their lungs collapsed from smoking, and that was the end. Yeah. So that put me into a whole different, it spun me into a new realm, new world of what happens next. My father had really gone over the deep end after that in his own trauma. He came back to the Virgin Islands and was drinking heavily to ease his own pain. And he shared with Karen that he was going to sail out on the northern side of the British Virgin Islands, which is the Atlantic, and sail out as far as he could with Erica and sink the ship, the boat, sink the stormy weather, and drown both himself and Erica. So we had to do an intervention. Yeah. It was uncertain what the next steps were. Kristen and Karen had come down as well. So they took charge. They essentially went into triage crisis mode.
So they had been in New Hampshire while that happened, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then they went down.
Yeah, they were living in Franconia.
Okay.
So they knew that they had to get Jamie, me, and Erica out of there. So they had to devise a plan, and they took Erica back to Franconia, figuring that they would take on the task of taking care of her. Mm-hmm. But for me, I got sort of taken in by David Hollins, the British guy, and flown to England. And actually, I flew by myself, and I went to Antigua and to Heathrow Airport and picked up by the Hollins family. And they happen to have a son about the same age as me. And it was also the period of time, at least in England, where you start, I guess it's middle school here. Mm-hmm. I have no identification with, American education from middle school to high school. Yeah,
so, I get that.
So it sort of gets a little confusing for me when I'm talking to Americans. So once in England, I'm going to school at a school called Pangbourne College, which was a nautical school, and my new friend Peter Hollins, we became fast friends, and we ended up starting boarding school together. And for me, going from chaos to calm, or to fly there on my own, I was in distress. I was in total distress. But it was also this excitement of a new adventure.
Yeah. How quickly between when your mother got burned to you being in England, like what was the time frame? Do you remember?
About a month.
Okay, so that's fast.
That's very fast.
A lot of changes.
Yeah. And then I'm going to school in all boys boarding school. Okay. Yeah. And essentially, from that period of time, I'm being raised by an institution, go on a short, the short 3-day kind of weekends, whatever they have in England. I would go with Peter back to their family, and it was, a normal family, sit down every Sunday to have, lamb and pork rinds or whatever, British, peas and... potatoes and stuff like that. But, and just Peter was into fixing engines and had old cars that, and they had some land where we could drive around and, in this car it would break down, we'd have to fix it and stuff like that. But during the major holidays, like summer, I would either go to the British Virgin Islands to be with my father or to New Hampshire. Okay. So my first vacation is I came over for Christmas, and my sister was married at this point in time, and they had bought a house in Dalton, an old farmhouse. Yeah. Anybody around here that knows it, there's kind of like a vale. There's like a valley, and it's fairly open up. I think it still is. And as you're going towards, is it 135 that goes close to the river? I think so. Yeah. So, going away from Littleton, if you're going over, I forgot the names of the roads because I've been away from here a little bit. Plus, I'm getting older and my memories are getting a little shot. But, that's okay. Just deal with it. Yeah. So that first, and it was.
So you came for Christmas.
I came for Christmas.
What do you remember about it?
The real remembrance is landing in Logan, and they picked me up in their VW bus, okay? And it's about 15, 20 below, full moon, not a cloud in the sky. And when we get north of Concord, where all the traffic is or whatever, Jim Mitchell, who was Kristen's husband at the time, turned off the headlights. and we could just drive down the road and just, driving down the road with, a hippie van, because this is, they were part of the hippie culture right there. And so that, my father came, and it felt like a normal Christmas, but all of us were together for the first time. So, but I had a sense of isolation and loneliness, and culture shock, and because I now had started assimilating to the British culture, and part of the survival mode is to become a chameleon and to change your spots. So I came back with a British accent. When I was in the British Virgin Islands, I had a West Indian accent. So I show up in England with a, hey, man,
Yes.
So I've been able to adapt. Yeah. I'm a good adapter. And so anyway, that's a long-winded story to getting to, my connection to the North Country.
Well, I don't think it's long-winded. I think it was great that you shared it, because I think it kind of frames your understanding and your passion for talking about managing fear and talking about resilience and talking about how trauma impacts our lives. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important that you shared that.
Right.
And there's some pieces of you in those stories that I don't know if people would really see them or understand them otherwise.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I think an important part of the story, the origins of the trauma came from my father. And there's a transference of trauma through generations. So I was passed with this trauma from my father, who grew up, as a only child. He was born in 1917, and his father died of the pandemic in 1918 or 19, somewhere in there. He was 2 years old when his father died. So he grew up with a taciturn mother, and she ended up marrying to another thing, but not a very loving family. And I think he grew up lonely. Okay. He ended up going to Andover. It's a major boarding school in Andover, Mass. So that for him, in a similar way, that was an escape. It's where he first learned skiing. Yeah. And he spent time in the White Mountains. He skied Tuckerman Ravine.
Did he?
In the late 30s. Also when he was going to Yale. So there was a connection to the White Mountains there. And I think that's really ultimately how Kristen ended up at St. Mary's in the Mountain, a.k.a. White Mountain School, which is no longer in existence, which is kind of a shame, because it really had a good connection and identity to this community. Yeah.
So, Jamie, I am curious, when did you realize that, or when did you get an understanding for the trauma that gets passed from generations, and how did that
I think
understanding come about?
Yeah. I think it's an evolution of time. You have to go through a passage of time, and I only have made that realization. My insights have really come together in the last 2 years. 2-3 years. I think I've made a major breakthrough to really put the pieces together. I've done a lot of work over time, but never really got to the place of forgiveness and self-love. To understand the entirety of the problem, and to be able to it's not confront it, but to make peace with it and not have it control my life. So I became more empowered to be myself, to operate from a whole different operating system of empowerment, my own self-empowerment, and not being controlled by demons.
Yeah.
You know, my dreams were always traumatic. They were violent dreams. Now they're dreams of happiness and color.
You have nice dreams?
Yes.
That is such a gift.
Yeah.
That's a good sign, I think.
Yeah. But, you know, it's given me a lot of insight and an ability to have the conversation we're having today. Yeah. But to go back to the transference, my father became, during World War II, became a pilot in B-17s, flying over Germany and Romania, northern Italy. He was based out of southern Italy at that point. Don't ask me names, but he's doing bombing runs, and there's Messerschmitts trying to strafe them. There's flak in the air. One particular mission over. I'm going to hack the name, but it starts with a P, Pelosi, which is not right because that was the Speaker of the House. I don't mean to insult her or anything, and I don't want to get political. But, so this was a very famous bombing run in which a lot of the B-17s got shot down, but before that, they had a very successful bombing run, bombing the oil refineries. That's where Nazi Germany was getting their oil supplied from. So that was a key target. But this particular run, I believe, actually, for the longest time, I thought he was the captain, but he was the co-captain or whatever, whatever, the second in command of the airplane. And what happened is that they got shot up pretty well by Messerschmitts. His captain got shot dead. The tail gunner, I believe, was blown out of the airplane. The tail gunner, that's a very vulnerable part of the aircraft. The landing gear was hydraulics were shot away for the landing gear, and so they were in bad situation. The plane was certain controls, like the foot controls. So my father had to take over flying this thing, crippled airflow.
Yeah.
And from this place in Poland back to the air base is a good 1,000 miles. It's a long trip and over enemy territory. But he also is flying with the formation along with. He wasn't flying back alone. But he knew he had to. He couldn't have landing gear, so he would have, when they got there, to do a belly landing on the landing strip. And so essentially, he gave the crew the option to bail out, and parachute out. And some of them, I'm pretty sure that some of them were wounded. I don't know for sure. I've gotten some of this just through research and going to the archives and reading through all that, and also reading the histories of that. But that definitely was bona fide. So the crew decided to stay with him, and he landed the plane successfully. But out of that, he also got shot in the thigh, which ended his military career there, or at least active. But anyway, he ended up getting the Silver Cross. I don't know what it's the second highest thing that you get, or third. You have a Gold Star, and then you have a Medal of Honor. Okay, that's sort of the order of things. But there was only 2 presidential commendation. Those that are familiar with military history would know what I'm alluding to. But there was only 2 that were awarded to different, commands. There were squadrons, and there was different levels. But his entire thing got a major award for this particular bombing run. So in the terms of history, it was significant.
Yeah.
The other one was over Germany. The flights were coming from England, where they were coming from Italy. So to get back to the trauma story, that's a major trauma thing. His childhood, he would get picked on and beat up a lot. He grew up in Newton, Mass, so there was like gangs and stuff like that. I don't know all the details, but I know that was part of his story. So I've already explained my growing up and the trauma that happened and the alcoholism. I think my mother, starting out in the marriage, was not an alcoholic, but became one. Yeah, and both of them were chain smokers, unfiltered Camel cigarettes. But that was part of the time, part of the culture, to get together, a social thing, and you drank and, smoking was a big thing. But that's just minor thing. But, jumping forward and how I get into climbing is, and it connects to... It connects to my father's war experience. This was an unconscious thing, and it's something I've realized, I think, in the last 10 years, is my climbing experience and the desire, and it also connects to the desire for exploration and adventure. Yeah. Just the way it was laid out with going to sea and going to a nautical college and learning celestial navigation and all that kind of stuff. But where I'm going to with the climbing is, in a way, it was a way to go into a severe situation where real fear is happening. Yeah. It is to relive my father's trauma. In a way, it was a part of that transfer. It
was like a trauma loop or something like that.
Yeah, and that's the transference.
Yeah.
Okay. So my choices in life became more about risk and confronting fear. Going back to that fear. In 1987, I had an opportunity to go do an expedition to Annapurna 1. Which is the 10th largest mountain in the world. And the circumstances was that we were going to do a brand new route up the south face. And the south face is very steep, 10,000 feet of vertical, from 18,000 feet to just above 26,000 feet. So that's an extreme thing to go into. You know going in, particularly Annapurna is known to have the highest fatality rate of all the 8,000 meter peaks. We know that going in, so it's sort of like going into combat. You know that you may not come back. Yeah, just the historical fact about high altitude climbing. Yeah. So we got to 23,000 feet, and we could see a storm coming in. We had some radio communication that something was coming in. It's 87, so it was kind of 1987, so it was kind of relay of information. May not entirely be accurate, but we're high enough to look out towards India and see this front coming in. And we're going, but we don't know the level or intensity of what it would be. But we're also trying. We're on a new route. We're also trying to attempt the second winter ascent of the mountain. If we had reached the summit, it would have just been after the winter solstice, right? Essentially from fall to winter. Mm-hmm. We had been arriving there just before Christmas. Okay. But at 23,000 feet, we slept overnight, to do a wait and see situation. It was starting to snow, and the intensity was happening. So we decided to descend all the way down to advanced base camp.
Where were you when you decided to descend?
23,000 feet.
23,000?
Yeah,
okay.
That was our high camp.
So you had 5,000 more to go?
Yeah. And it's not straight up to, we would climb to, Annapurna is the big massif. There's other subsidiary peaks. But if you are familiar with Mount Katahdin or Musalak, they're a massif. Okay, they're broad and have a broad top to them, and then you have a summit like the top of Baxter Peak. So we were, say, to the far. If you're looking at a mountain, the profile of the mountain, we were more to the right. And we would ascend to about 24,000 feet. And there's the long east ridge that goes to the summit of Annapurna 1. And that distance is about a mile of traversing, like cornices. And the southern side, or the south, the northern aspect is all glaciers. Yeah. And the first ascent came up from the I might be getting mixed up, but anyway, Henry Carrier, they came up from the north side, so there was a lot of glacier travel. And the first ascent was, I think, 1950 something, 7, 6. It's far enough in time that it doesn't matter, give or take a few years. Yeah. So we go down, we get to our advanced base camp. And overnight, we had 4 to 5 feet of snow overnight.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And so we're in a very vulnerable avalanche situation. Yeah. And we knew that we had no choice but to get moving back to where our base camp, which was, in a very safe place. Yeah. And so we're navigating in whiteout conditions. And fortunately, we'd made like cairns, anticipating if we were in trouble, we would need means to navigate back. So, fortunately, we made it back to base camp. But it's not the story; it's about what the outtake of the story is about. Really putting yourself in that kind of fear position and have to make decisions and self-preservation, and how that experience informs through real life experience. I got to experience a sense of what my father may have gone through, but the takeaway, by putting yourself in that position, you learn about decision making in a critical situation. And it comes to leadership, and anybody that's in a high-end corporation must have to make very strategic decisions. So this is the nature of your program. And I think taking that experience can be applied to your life. Okay, so climbing became more of a metaphor for me about. A lot of, I'm not a high-end climber. In grades and stuff like that, there's people that done, and if you know the history of mountaineer, it's people that went time and time back to the Himalayas, and some made it all the way through to old age, but many of them died. Just the nature of the beast, So I decided not to take the road of being a Himalayan climber from my experience, because it was necky. Yeah. But I used climbing as a means to hitting a threshold of fear, and I equate it to the sort of the primal scream, or there's a famous painting called The Scream. I don't know who was the painter. But it's a famous painting called The Scream, and it's, Kafka-like. Okay. Pretty intense. But typically, and I got known for this, is like losing my mind on there, and crying and fear of death. Yes. Oh, definitely. Definitely me. Wow. The sense that I was successful on in terms of leading were moderate routes, well within my ability. Yeah. On occasions, touching, my high points. But, I'm fortunate with, and particularly in the North Country here, we had a gang of people. I affectionately call us the Valhalla gang.
Okay.
I don't know if the rest of them, and one of these guys was a very well-known climber here, and we're kind of attached as brothers, is John Sykes.
Okay.
And everybody, he wrote a couple of guidebooks.
He did.
Yeah.
And you contributed.
Yes, I did.
You didn't write.
I didn't write. I might have done a little bit of research and ghostwriting, but I contributed most of the photographs.
Nice.
So, we've had a long-term relationship, but he's a much stronger and higher end. So a lot of First Ascents also, I was not the lead guy, but he was the lead guy. But we had gone through many, great long-term experiences, and loved the guy to death, but he can be a ornery son of a bitch is because he had his own traumas to go through. So we had an interesting relationship.
Yeah.
He's now traveling around the country with his wife Laura, and they would stay in one base camp at some place and then go off. They climb in one location and migrate. They're nomadic now. They've sold all their worldly possessions, and
that sounds so nice.
Yeah, isn't that nice?
Yeah.
But John Sykes, if it wasn't for Laura, would not be in the position to do that.
Yeah.
He'd be, he'd still be working like I am.
Yeah.
Living the climbing lifestyle, you forego some of the, traditional routes.
Right.
Now I maybe feel a little regret. I'm now approaching 70 in December. I have to continue working, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I've had my retirement early, and I continue to have my retirement by still climbing and whatnot, and hiking.
Yeah.
In fact, planning on doing the last 100 miles of the John Muir Trail. First.
Nice.
Yeah, but I got some recovery to do. I just had back surgery and full knee replacement, so I got some hustling to do to get in shape for that. So,
or slowing down for a little bit. After?
Yeah.
After the hustle?
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the trauma story and how to deal with some of that. But there's a lot of other parts that that I can impart about that. I don't think there's enough time.
There's not enough time, but I think you just teased everybody with what you were talking about. You talked about facing these critical decisions, especially when you're out in Annapurna and you made the decision to turn around and you still were afraid for your life, it sounds like. Can you talk about what that fear was like for you? Because I don't think that I really understand that level of fear.
Well, the fear exists, and you learn as a climber, fear is part of the game. So what happens more is you get into an intense mode of I just had the word in my head is clarity in terms of the strategic thinking. Mm-hmm. It's part of the survival response. I'm also ADHD, so things where are of great interest to me, and that's one of the aspects that an ADHD person is. They are going to respond to things that they really really latch on to. Mm-hmm. Like in school, I did well in the subjects I really were into, like geography, geomorphology, weather, navigation, so on. So you get in a mode, but I think any climber also gets into a very, the fear is transferred into doing, into, figuring out the problem. You are feeling fear, but you're pushing through the fear because you're busy making decisions to survive, and being quick on your feet to think think through how am I going to do that and not make a mistake. Okay?
And yeah, I guess the highest level of fear I've experienced is paralyzing fear, where I'm not moving through it. I mean, I dabbled a little bit in climbing, but I honestly don't know how I did what I did, because I'd get up on the rock and then just feel like a cat clinging on for dear life, you know?
Right. It's sort of a catatonic
yeah.
state. And talking, the word catatonic, when I first came back from England, I was totally anglicized. And I became, it was a real culture shock. And even to this day, I don't feel American.
Yeah. I
feel international. Living in the British Virgin Islands and Britain. So I think that relates to the fear part as well. There is a transference of fear. Fear is fear, and fear can happen in any place, any circumstance. So in terms of what I did is apply through real experience and real intention by climbing, I'd learn about fear. So when I applied that to everyday living, a job, new situation, what do I do next situation, scenarios.
Yeah.
It is to pass through that fear and get into a place of what do I need to do. I've had to reinvent myself many times, and I've been in, I have many lives besides climbing. I went to school to be a photojournalism journalist and documentary photographer. So there was a period of time where I'm learning that and getting involved with, I'm not trying to be political here, but activism. Yeah. And going into different situations that were actually intense. Again, here I'm attracted to the intensity of a situation. A photojournalist, they go into a lot of situations. Some of the photojournalism is very pedestrian and safe, but I was attracted to going to protests where there might be riots and real confrontation. I've been over the wall of Seabrook nuclear plant. I blocked the gates of the CIA, so I'm probably on their database.
They're probably listening.
Yeah. And then, I have to reveal that I started the Bridge Brigade in New Hampshire, but I've applied a lot of my experience to lead that and create that. So without going into that, basically is applying my life experience. And this experience is where... in the last few years, I've noticed I've come to a point of realization or self empowerment, and having the courage now to take a leader, be really in a leadership position, and be able to create something from nothing that is really really matters to me. And that I feel I'm making a difference, that I'm empowering, several, 100 people. They're the core people of this organization, and impacting thousands upon thousands of people driving under a bridge. Yeah. So there's a sense of responsibility. But an interesting part of this in terms of organization is that I knew the right people to bring on board. I have a intuitive sense of who is qualified to maybe. I knew I was getting in trouble by starting this thing. Okay? Yeah. And I needed help, so I knew I needed to reach out for help, and I had help, and I ended up getting individuals, but one in particular who I saw as more qualified in terms of professional running a business and activism and so forth, where I knew I had to take my ego out of it and step back and have others lead. And that is a certain step of courage and self-awareness. So my self-awareness level is at a point where it's very clear. You know, I'm very clear. It's not from an ego place to say, I know exactly who I am and what I'm about and where I want to go, you know. And that clarity through the course of my life, without all those experiences, I would not be at this place now. I would be still trying to figure it out. I'm always going to it never goes away, but there's a peace with it. You know, I have peace with it and I accept it. I've accepted the trauma and be able to pass through that and knowing the fear experience.
Wow. We're at the top of the hour.
Yeah.
I can't believe it.
I think we covered the topic fairly well.
I think it was a teaser, that's all.
Yeah.
I do want to remind everyone that you're listening to WZNC LP Bethlehem 99.9 FM, streaming online at nococommunityradio.org. This is North Country Community Radio, and you've been listening to North of Normal with Amanda McKeen, featuring Jamie Cunningham. Jamie, I feel like it's a very abrupt way to end our conversation. Would you be okay with staying on for a couple more minutes just so we can have this?
I'm going to take your lead.
Okay.
Because I'm sure you have the questions.
Yeah, I think I can just pick up on that piece of empowerment that you're talking about, and the piece of having certainty in who you are after so much uncertainty and trauma in your life. I bet you a lot of people want to hear more of how did you get to that. Like, what was the defining moment where suddenly you felt like you could see? What made that happen in the last 2 years? Right.
It has to do with being in relationships.
Okay.
My personal, relationship with women's and the ups and downs of that.
Okay.
In one particular relationship, I was trying to be somebody for somebody else. I don't know if I'm articulating that.
You are. Continue.
Yeah. So, it was 10 years of trying to conform to and trying to make something work that wasn't working. Going through therapy, and couple therapy and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But coming to the one, it's always the wrong one. Okay, I was always being criticized and taking that to heart, but that was part of the conflict within the relationship, because I knew that I made mistakes, but I didn't deserve the abuse that I'm the wrong one, and I need to conform to make this relationship work. Mm-hmm. And it felt like I never could do anything right. I was very controlling. She climbed a little bit. We go on climbs, but it was sort of like she wanted to be part of our climbing community. But my friends, like John Sykes and that whole Valhalla crew, they could see a lot more of what was mm-hmm. going on than I could, which is kind of typical in a dysfunctional. I'm saying everything's good or I'm trying or whatever. But through therapy, I was able to, with the therapist, and this comes back to having guides in your life or angels, and I've had many angels along the way. So it took a while for me to realize that I wasn't wrong, and that I know who I am and owning myself, and that in fact the person that was accusing me of being a narcissist, and controlling her, it was actually the opposite. And I came to a realization. I said, that's enough. And I owned it. I took charge. I had to make a critical decision. But I think that was, if I compare it to other periods in my life, this is one where I lost myself.
Yeah.
And then had to find myself. That was a very intense period of time, where I lost that power. I lost my power, and I took it back.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
So you were reminded of who you were.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't like...
it's the like in painting, you have negative space and positive space. But negative and positive don't work. They work together.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
You're always going to have the world. We live in a world of opposites, and you have to learn to compromise or become clear where your position is in life.
Yeah, and not just wish that the other
will change.
The opposing thing doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's an illusion, a mirage. Can be.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that part. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I think that that's helpful to know that that's kind of where you took your power back and you drew that line in the sand, and sounds like you haven't looked back.
Exactly.
Good for you.
And that experience, and that's the other thing I want to impart here, is that, again, is passing through the fear, but also, it was a bad, I don't think it as a wasted 10 years. I see it as the value out of that from bad you can also impart good or take on good. I could be bitter and all that, but I'm not. I'm thankful for that experience.
So good. I think now we're probably at a nice stopping point.
Watch out for that.
No.
Telephone.
Yeah. No, this was good. I so appreciate you being here. Thank you for sharing such vulnerable parts of your life with everybody. Yeah,
that's part of, it's fearful to come on this show.
Yeah.
But to, have the heart to do what I do and own it and be able to speak to it.
Yeah.
I think it has value.
Absolutely. I pick up on patterns in this show, and when I have guests who come on that are vulnerable and they share parts of their story that, maybe someone else wouldn't share, those are the episodes that get the most listens, and they get people that are responding and saying, oh my gosh, this was so good. And it's because you're being human.
That's right. And that's what this show is all about.
Yes, it's permission to be human.
Yeah, yeah.
And it helps other people say, oh, this is okay.
Yeah, and what you're doing, you as an individual and what you're created, it speaks to what our conversation's all about. Yeah. And I know that you can identify with a lot of it because you grew up abroad too.
I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
I definitely didn't have the same experiences as you, but I understand your comment about being a chameleon. Totally.
Yeah.
All right. One thing I've noticed after a year of these conversations is that people rarely fit into the boxes that we create for them. The business owner is more than their business. The volunteer is more than the cause that they support. The retiree, the artist, the teacher, the parent, the neighbor, every one of them carries experiences, lessons, and stories that are impossible to see at first glance. That's why we keep showing up every Tuesday here, because every conversation reminds me there's always more to learn about the people around us. Thank you to our listeners for spending this hour with us. Thank you for supporting local radio. And thank you to today's guest, Jamie Cunningham, for sharing part of his story. If you'd like to continue the conversation, you can always reach me at amanda@clearviewadvantage.com. And if you missed part of today's episode or you want to explore past conversations, you can find them at clearviewadvantage.com/podcast. I'm Amanda McKeen. I will see you back here next Tuesday. Until then, stay grounded, stay curious, and stay a little north of normal. Jamie, thank you again.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Ours too.